Welcome to the Success Resequencing Project. I'm Debbie Ponticus.
And I'm Jenn Newman.
Join us as we challenge the traditional definitions of success so you can build a fulfilling path of your own.
Get ready for inspired, candid conversations while gaining tools, inspiration, and confidence to create your own authentic success story. The great Walt Disney once said, "All of our dreams can come true if we have the courage to pursue them." I think one of the things most successful entrepreneurs have in common is having the courage to take a risk and follow a dream, even if that means going all in. And that is exactly what our guest on today's podcast has done. Kiel Klaphake stood in the middle of the desert, had a vision, and took a chance, all at the young age of 29. With his wife, Cassandra, at his side, they went all in on his dream to build what is known today as the Arizona Broadway Theater. His story is one of true grit, determination, and perseverance. And today he will share how the theater has become more than just a career. It's become his greatest encore. Hi, Kiel.
Hi, Jenn.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. We are so happy to have you. And thanks for just showing up and just telling your story as we walk through an amazing journey of yours. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So listen, your story is so compelling to me, and I know is going to resonate with a lot of our listeners, in that you had a bold idea that you brought to fruition at the age of 29, and you are the one that literally said, "I'm going to go build a theater in the desert." And what I think is so compelling about that is that you really truly had a very strong career on the performance side of the business. And so many performers, that's like the end all be all to what they do. That's it. That's the thing. We work hard for it. We audition, we start performing, we travel, we do. And then that's supposed to be the pinnacle. And what I would love for you to share is really, what was that pivotal moment for you when you said, "I'm actually going to transition from that. We're going to go into the middle of Peoria, Arizona, and we're going to build a theater." Like, it's just the best. So I just take us through that. Take us through that moment when you knew it was time to go after that.
Well, I'm not sure if there was one particular moment, like a lightning strike.
Yes.
I think it was sort of...
There was a monsoon.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd never heard of monsoons until I moved here,
Fair.
incidentally. No, I think there were a variety of things as a performer. We're so focused on ourself, creating your own craft, studying, the best practices to be the best performer you can. And you create your own little micro business. How do I make and market myself through headshots and writing resumes and writing letters to try to get work. And I enjoyed that. I did that for several years and was successful doing it. But I knew that I had more that I wanted to do. Performing is it's a very specific skill set. And I give all the credit and kudos to all of our performers that we still have coming to our theater.
Sure.
It is a hard job.
Yes, it is.
Ask anybody in it. And just because you're traveling and you have to go from place to place and live out of a suitcase. And
exciting.
So, my wife and I were both performers living in New York City, and we were on opposite coasts working. And we had somebody else watching our house. It kind of became apparent that this was the time for us to figure out what's that next chapter, right? The 20s, my wife and I met, we went through college and grad school, went overseas, did performing and really, got that life. And we thought, well, we're approaching our 30s, and what does that next, decade look like for us? And we had no idea. Do you continue doing the same thing, living in New York, auditioning, leaving town where you perform and doing all that stuff, or figure out what that next chapter has to look like? And it sort of developed over a period of time, but then there was a few moments that kind of sparked it to say, I think I can figure out how to make this happen. I think it has to do with a little bit of, self-confidence.
Sure.
And also a willingness to recognize what you don't know, as well as what you know. That maybe that naive confidence will get you very far. And so I've always kind of had a philosophy of, how hard could it be? And I said that at the very beginning. How hard could it be to create a theater? Other people have done it in the past, right? Don't you just snap your fingers?
Sure.
Right.
And there it is. Yeah.
Well, and that's how it happened. So thank you all for listening.
Yes, that's great.
And
there was a big snap
that was very
of fingers.
inspiring. Thank you.
And we ended up here in Arizona. But no, it developed over time. And my wife and I just said, we need to figure out what that is. And I had the crazy idea to want to build something of my own and felt that I could. And we said, why not? Let's go to Arizona, having never been to Arizona in my life.
Oh, seriously? Never been?
No.
Okay.
No.
So what was there the draw to Arizona?
Yeah.
So great question. So we, once I started to sort of cultivate the idea of creating a theater company, we hired a marketing firm to give us some information because I didn't know anything about running a theater or where to do it. And the marketing firm, it was right after the 2000 census. And so there was fresh data. Okay. And started to look at where there were growth patterns in the country. We started looking at areas that were underserved for the performing arts. And a lot of the targeting kind of went to the west of the Mississippi. Yep. Being the East is very filled with all kinds of great arts organizations. But the West was sort of new, and there were a lot of not migrants, it's probably not the word, but a lot of transplants coming from the Midwest that are wanting to move to Arizona to retire and such. And so one of the key markets was looking at the Phoenix market. And poof, we landed in Arizona.
In Arizona.
In the desert.
But it was kind of fun because in developing the theater, we were looking at either renovating a facility, identifying some spaces that could work, or building something. And incidentally, one of the people I sang with at Riverside Church in New York City, met a whole bunch of really great people there, was an architect by trade. And I said, hey, we're working on this crazy idea, possibly wanting to build a theater. What do you think? And he said, well, my graduate project was creating a dinner theater concept. And so we started taking his research that he had done and started to play around with coming up with building our own facility. And of all places, Arizona. Yeah. Finally, I decided to come out to Arizona to actually see what it was like.
Might want to go do it. Might want to see what this place is all about.
And then the west side, like for you to have known about Peoria, was that also, did they drill down to that level in your market research beforehand? That was more just you coming out here.
It was really larger metropolitan areas or states. Was this large group? I mean, and we see that now. Obviously, the number one, the Chicago residents are coming to Arizona for spring break and all that stuff.
Exactly.
So, then we started dialing in, and my father, who was an economic development director by trade, would be involved in various cities and economic development efforts.
Yes.
And he got to know some people, a former city manager from the city of Peoria, and she introduced us to Peoria, Arizona, and kind of that led into us at least identifying a community that might be interested.
Yeah.
They were, of course, able to sell Peoria, Arizona as on the west side of town, being that there was also, growth patterns showing the west side is huge for potential. And of course, because of its proximity to the retirement community of Sun City, it already was really ripe for what we were looking for.
Absolutely.
And completely underserved in the arts. There was really no performing arts on the west side of town
wasn't.
At the time.
So how long did that process take from the minute, so you were 29 years old, you came up with this really great idea, flew out to the desert and said, we're going to build, if you build it, they will come, basically. How long did it take from the idea to opening doors?
So this was all back in 2001. Is sort of when this was all kind of developed. And then, of course, in the fall of 2001, we had 9/11. And at that point, it sort of led to a deeper discussion on, is this the place that we want to stay and live?
Sure.
Is now the time to really take this? Everybody has a crazy idea that they want to do, right? Hey, someday I'm going to do this, create this magic widget. And for us, it was sort of, we were exploring the idea, but once 9/11 happened, we said, you know what, now is the time.
Yeah.
And the idea of building something for ourselves got us out of the city.
Yeah.
We wanted to eventually have a family, and we didn't really see that happening while we were in the city. So That was 2001. So we moved out in 2002 to Arizona. And got an apartment, in Glendale, Arizona, and then we started working directly with our contractor and architect because we'd already identified a location for where we wanted to build the theater, and we had to negotiate that and the use of the land, and of course there was financing on a building, all of these, things that an actor doesn't necessarily know.
Right.
But I think actors are really great because they're willing to figure things out, right?
Yeah.
They're willing to solve that, and they do the research on it. And so, anyway, so that kind of led to getting the land identified and finding financing, and then poof.
Wow. There it
was a
is.
theater.
There was the finger
There was a
snap.
theater that happened.
that easy.
That was the finger snap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That easy.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. When you first spoke that idea and started talking to people about it, did you find that having something that is that bold, did you find that people were supportive of you? Or did you have a lot of naysayers going, you've lost your mind? Like, stick to singing, Kyle. Like, no, you're not going to go do that. Or did you feel that you had a rally of community around you?
You know, it was interesting. It's a great question. I think it was probably the people that were outside of the industry that were more in support of it than the people in the industry.
I could see that.
I think in the industry, we all recognize that it's a complicated machine.
Yes.
And in it, you might look at all of the choices you have to make and be overwhelmed by the volume of it.
Yep.
So in conveying it to some of our initial investors to help build the theater, a lot of it was just driven by, having experience, my own experience, the other team that we had assembled that were experts in the field.
Yep.
And then being able to present to them that this was a new novel idea and that we knew what we were talking about, which was a little bit of sales work because you have to convey that you know what you're talking about to these other individuals, and they bought into the idea because I think even beyond the business side, they believe in the people. Right? You invest, you engage with people because you trust them.
Yep.
And they believed in us and the way that we presented it and our preparation, the business plan that we wrote. I mean, it was all very detailed. It wasn't just, shucks, kid.
Yeah,
we're going to open, back in the early 1900s, mid 1900s, everybody was opening, a theater in somebody's barn in their backyard.
Right.
Correct.
And, there's musicals based on that.
Yes,
and we're going to put on a show.
Yep.
And I think we approached a little bit more, from the business side,
I was gonna say,
to make sure that it made sense. Yeah. And that worked. So
amazing.
Absolutely incredible.
I mean, it's such one of the things that you told us before this podcast, which I think was really a pivotal mindset that you took into this, was about how to get to something grand or something big, to not get overwhelmed. Like you had mentioned, like this is to just come in and not even know where to start. But all you have to do is just make tiny decisions, one after the next. So talk to us about that mindset.
So, on the one hand, I think there's a level of experience in an industry. You have to know how to spell.
Yeah,
right?
Yes.
I mean, you have to know some basic functions of whatever the business that you're trying to do. You're going to be a baker, you probably need to know what a measuring cup looks like.
Right. I mean, it's helpful.
It is usually helpful unless you don't care, and that's your
its own entity.
Probably won't be a successful bakery, but it's
or
fun.
maybe in this day and age, maybe the most successful because we just throw a bunch of ingredients in a bowl.
Yes.
Also possible.
So I think there's part that, but the other part is, I think, looking at all of the choices and decisions you have to make just with your eyes open, and not be afraid of having to think about and figure out what all those decisions are. And so there's a lot of research you have to do if you're confronted with something that you know nothing about, which frankly, I knew very little about running a theater, owning a building, operating all of that. I didn't know. And so, I mean, there were books on my shelf that I had dog-eared and used as foundations, asked everybody I knew in the industry, hey, what's this like? When I was designing the theater, I contacted most of the technical directors that I'd ever known and said, hey, what do you think about this? Should it be like this or like this? And so utilizing that and just looking at it, I think with your eyes open and recognizing that none of the decisions that we have to make are precious. Nothing is absolute. There is no proper way to accomplish what you're trying to do. There's no roadmap. And I think that was very exciting to me. I like to be able to, I like to go hiking. I like to go down and not know what's around the corner, but I'm prepared to handle it. If the wind comes or it gets cold, you put on a raincoat. So you're prepared for those sort of things, but not knowing exactly how to do it was really one of the most fun parts, is just figuring out and having to solve those questions. It took a lot of energy.
Yeah.
But I still love that to this day. I like to be able to be challenged and try to solve puzzles.
I was just going to say, and that it's the ultimate puzzle. I think building any business, it is the ultimate puzzle, because regardless if someone has done it before you, it's still a unique person, a unique individual that's now embarking on that journey. So it is going to be different by nature, that we're all different. So there's something about learning from those who have already done it, but then there's also about discovering within yourself what is going to make it unique when you do it.
And I think that that's one of the key foundational elements of our company right now, is that we are looking at every decision along the continuum that you're having to ask yourself, is that still the right choice? Sure. Not just, I did it last year, I did it 5 years. This is the way it's done, right? The industry tells you how you're supposed to do things.
Right.
Yeah.
Those words, I always twinge when somebody says, well, it's supposed to be this way, or and that never works for us, because we want to I try to solve it based on the circumstances of the day, which may be different than yesterday.
Absolutely.
Look, the world is very different than pre-COVID. We operate a business in a different environment now. And I think it's really important for everybody to kind of look at new ways with new eyes. I think it's important.
That evolution is critical. It also means it never gets stale, which is also, right, that's always our goal, right? When you originally had the concept, did you always know it was going to be a dinner theater?
No. Years ago, even before this idea came together, I always thought, again, like we all dream, someday I'm going to run my own theater company. And but I'd never really put all the pieces together. It wasn't until 2001 when sort of forming the idea of two really easy businesses we stick together.
Food and beverage and
so
theater.
Yeah, we're gonna stick those two together, because boy, I'm gonna invest in that. That sounds like a really good idea. But oddly, putting those two together made both of the problems of the two less of a mountain to overcome.
Interesting.
And so in theater, right, you try to get people to come on a regular basis. You try to make sure that it's convenient. In the restaurant side, you don't know who's coming to your restaurant that night. You try to encourage reservations. So you put the two together, and we have a pretty good understanding of how many people will be in the facility eating in a given evening. And because of that convenience factor, the removal of some of those barriers that are obstructions to people going out, right?
Sure.
It's hard to go to theater sometimes in a big city, because you got to drive in. It's usually around rush hour.
Right,
you got to eat. You got to park.
Right.
There's a hassle.
So true.
Right.
And so if you can remove the hassle of it, hopefully it will get people to want to be a part of it, because you've removed that element.
The barrier, right?
Yeah. And interesting, even in our design of our facility, we built it to try to be, as accommodating, large lobby and the women's restrooms, which of course my wife will always comment on, is that it is, I think, 3 times the number required by code for the number of female restrooms based on the occupancy of the facility. And part of it was, yes, I want to make sure I take care of the ladies, because they're very important.
Yes.
Yes.
Rule number
That's
one.
It. That's all I have to say.
And done. And we're done.
There is nothing
Period.
else.
And scene. Yeah, for sure.
But on the other hand, I don't want to, and you see this all the time, is that intermission is you're standing in line to use the restroom.
Yeah,
that's right.
I don't want that. That's a hassle. And so I want you to have a good time. So hopefully you can go in and out and then enjoy the break of intermission and maybe have a drink at the bar, or try to have a conversation. Hey, what'd you think of Act 1? You can't do that if you're just standing in line using the restroom.
Exactly.
And so that was one of the
smart
conveniences that we wanted to make sure we had.
You nailed it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think probably the person who wrote the code was a man. I'm just guessing, and I'm nothing against it, but they don't have the problem that we have, and so it's very smart of you to listen to your wife.
Yes, Cass knew.
She knew.
Cheers to her.
She did it all. I'm just here. I'm just the mouthpiece.
Right. Yes.
She is a queen. What's a question that you have always wanted to be asked in this environment. You have talked about the start of your company. You have promoted this company for 20 years. You've been a Valley presence. You've created a community. And so you've had a lot of opportunity to talk about this business over the years. What's a question that you've always wanted to be asked and you've never been?
This question.
And we're
Actually,
done.
no, I've never wanted to be asked this question. So I don't like to be put on the spot.
Fair.
I like to do my homework. I'm not entirely sure. I think so much of the theater, obviously we're talking about sort of the origin concept and what drove us. We're looking at, 20 years of operating now.
Yeah.
The questions that are sort of in my head of late have been sort of, what's the next chapter look like,
Yeah.
right? You start a business, you make it 3 to 5 years, congratulations. We celebrated 10 years, right around 15. Then we had COVID, we survived COVID. We even just survived opening the theater in general, which was in 2005.
Exactly.
That almost didn't happen with all the challenges of opening.
Sure.
But now, I don't know. I think a lot of the questions that I've been hearing from people and I've been thinking about is sort of what's that next chapter? What does that look like? What's the next stage for my wife and I?
Yep.
With regarding, what's in store for the theater itself, what's in store for us.
Yep.
One of the things that I think, and it was actually asked right at the beginning when we were starting from our initial bank, was, what happens if this thing goes south? They have to chop it up into pieces and sell it off because the bank, owns it. Okay, well, then what's the next stage? Do we take our business concept and eventually find ways to branch it off, share it with other communities, show other communities how they could create our business concept and appeal to a community? Is this the magnum opus? Is this the one thing that I will have accomplished? I'm entirely grateful to have been able to do it, and where the business has gone to this point. Yep. But I think the questions now are really what's that next phase? What's the legacy of the organization? And as much as I don't think of myself in the environment, I sort of helped make it happen. Yep. It's not for me. Ask anybody at the theater. It's not about what Kyle wants. Well, it is what Kyle wants. It's what Cassandra wants, my wife. But usually what I want is what is in the best interest of the business. Yeah. I don't need, there to be, I guess what I'm trying to get to is there's an anti-ego effort that we have in the organization. Yeah. And I think it runs through several individuals and our core, philosophy when we hire actors and all that. There's something bigger than oneself. And now I'm looking at it going, okay, well, what's the next phase? Our kids are graduating high school and moving on. What's that next phase for the organization for us? And I'd probably say is that it's here next year. It's here tomorrow. That's always been my goal, is to be here the next day. Yep. And I think the only way to do that is to be able to look farther in the future, is be able to have some level of perspective that says it's not just about my decision today. Granularly, we can say things like, if I'm promoting a show, can I do certain things that may potentially cause this explosion of interest, but disrupt some of our key donors and subscribers? While I might sell more tickets to that show, if I gave a tremendous discount, hopefully people would flock in. But what does that mean for the next show and the show after that? So there's a level of consistency that we're always trying to look to make sure that it is around the next year. So I don't know if I answered your question at all. But
I think that is, though, a great lead in. And I know you and I would be on the same page on this question. Then listen, you are walking young actors through a process every show that you do. You are housing them, you are taking care of them, you are providing this incredible environment for them. So you transitioned into giving, not only are you giving to your audience, but you're giving to your actors. Okay, so that's part one. The other piece to that, though, is what are other ways of giving back or things that you're wanting to create that are outside of the confines of what you have built? 20 years is a long time to have an organization. It's an established entity that's weathered many storms. But what have you felt in answer to the question that you're now starting to ask? What does that look like for you? I mean, do you have a sense of where the next chapter is? Do you feel that it's a whole other idea, or is it just building upon what you've already built?
That's interesting because we started the theater. We started not your traditional theater way, which is we have a great aw shucks moment. We're going to start a theater in a church basement. And after 15 years, eventually we might end up with a legitimate facility.
Exactly.
We went out the gate with, year round, 7 shows a year, every day, all the time, big staff, big budget right away because we knew we had to make my bank happy because you'd have to pay that. And we knew we needed to hire full-time professionals. Sure. We couldn't just be a summer stock. Right. Obviously, there's not really summer stock in Arizona.
No.
Conversely, we realized we had to do summer shows in Arizona, which was not really something that anyone did a lot of. There wasn't a lot of summer theater here. Yeah. But I think you actually hit upon it, is that we're the impact that we're able to have on, look, we were all young kids, very impressionable, right? You're in middle school, you're in high school, and you saw something that inspired you. If it was, going to a hockey game and going, oh, that was amazing, I want to do that someday. Or going to the band concert, you go, oh, wow, that was amazing, that inspired me. All seems to happen around, by around the 5th grade, is that level of inspiration. After that, it starts to fade. Those that had inspiration prior to 5th grade and went on and continued to go because their parents dragged them along, they continued their love for it. And to see in the young people that are actors now and know that they have this love for it because they were exposed to it early on. There is an element of that we've had for 20 years. I'm able to see this now as the next generation of actors is coming in, is that they were inspired, they were connected, and it is so important and so precious for them to be able to have had that connection. That's the whole magic behind it. Look, no one's going to make, a king's ransom in being an actor. It's feast or famine. It is hard work. You live out of a suitcase, but you get to do an amazing thing. You get to do something that not everybody else gets to. And that's a really awesome thing. Having been a performer and recognizing that is, you're part of something that is it's going to expire, right? It's not a painting on the wall like this painting behind you, Deb.
That's right. That painting that is still on the wall.
It's still on the wall.
Still on the wall. Yes.
That you could see over and over again. This is that it ends, and there's really something magical when the room is filled with that energy, that live performance energy. Yes. You can't bottle it up. You can't replace it. When people are leaning forward, and we just did Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder, and it was silent. There was a pin drop. People were leaning because they had no idea what it was about. But it was a really cool show with great music and a plot that was throwing you left and right, and people were silent. It was the coolest thing ever. And then we turn around and we have Little Mermaid on stage, and it's filled with kids, and everybody's up and they're getting up and walking around, and kids are talking, and they recognize a character and they yell, "Oh, Sebastian!" I mean, they're engaged, and that is just as magical that they have that sort of buy-in, almost in a anyway.
Now, do you guys have a children's theater, or where you bring in these young, inspiring 5th graders and give them an area to thrive?
So my wife and I both worked years ago with Missoula Children's Theater up in Montana, and so we have a really great affinity for kids theater. In fact, our son is headed there to help out with one of their summer camps this summer.
I love that.
Fun.
And so we've continued that tradition, in our family. So when we first started the theater, we immediately launched an education program, which was an academy program for kids to enroll for a week or 2 in the summertime, come in from outside, and get to explore theater, and then eventually put on a show or a showcase and things like that. And that has been going on since the very beginning. I've always felt that it was an important part of what we can do. And as a professional theater company, we have all the resources to be able to execute educational theater because it's already all there. We do shows which will sometimes be on the same set and the same title. We'll do junior versions of shows.
Yes, love that, yes.
So Little Mermaid Junior on the set of Little Mermaid, which is pretty cool. They get to get on the fully realized professional stage. And it's the same magic. They just You can't hear this. I just opened my mouth and gaped because there was this big awe moment.
Right.
When they get to see those sort of things. And that magic is seeing that in little people's faces is extraordinary. We've continued a pretty strong education program. We also do theater for young audiences where we travel to schools and go to libraries in various places. We have master classes. We have a lot of stuff going on.
That's exciting. So what would you, changing directions just a little bit, what would you tell a young actor today?
What would I tell a young actor today? You're in for a ride.
Okay.
That's a tough one. It's hard to just come up with the buzz phrase
advice
of this podcast that says this is the one thing you need.
That's what we're waiting for, the one thing.
I don't know if I have
some
that.
advice. Like if you had someone come in and maybe, you could see yourself in them, a mid-20s to 29-year-old who's trying to make it in this industry, and you see the struggle. Like what advice would you give them?
So I am a huge believer in training and education. And you can achieve great things by not going to education or having formal training programs. Things are out there. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of young people might have certain feelings about the costs and investment in your own education and training. They want to leap out and make millions because they have the newest, craziest idea. They're going to open a podcast and sell T-shirts and do all the things.
We are selling T-shirts.
Yeah, T-shirts. Yes. I expect. Yes. Okay, next time.
Yes. T-shirts, sweatshirts.
We're going to have a merch shop.
Hoodie.
Yes. Mm-hmm. They'll just have to bang on the door because it's locked. So I would really say, my wife and I are both champions for higher education. And we had our children both go through public school. And both of our kids our youngest is going off to college this fall. Our older one is already in college. And that's a huge part of what we believe in, is that you can't replace the hard work. And while as an actor, you can be discovered because you were a grip on a production. That's the person who runs cables or carries crap.
Great, thank you for explaining.
Behind the camera. You could do that and be discovered and suddenly you're in a movie. You could do that. Or you could go through the training route and actually have developed a skill that is very marketable. And that is part of the process that I love. I love the idea of learning your craft and learning about all things theater or musical theater or music in general. My wife and I were both musicians originally. And so studying music as a skill, as a craft was fantastic. Imagine though going to, study opera, which is what we both studied. It's not a highly marketable degree
skill set
these days.
Guilty.
But it led to other things.
Absolutely.
There's so many other elements to any sort of an education that once you study something to that level, it doesn't matter what it is, that you've put that level of effort into something and become great at it. Even if you don't apply it directly in what you're doing, the concept of knowing how to study that level and your attention to detail is something you just can't replace without, hard work.
Right.
Yeah. And I think you're spot on with, I think the challenge that a lot of people face when they are having the big dream or having, I want to do this, is that whole get rich quick mentality where truly when you look at our industry, your industry, and a lot of industries, that there's a fame to, right? The truth is it's just hard work, and you can't be afraid of the work. And there's a reward for it, you know? And yes, there are the people that can go on, American Idols or go and get noticed or, discovered.
Sure.
That happens, like you said. But for most people, it's just about showing up.
Yeah.
And making the effort bigger than the dream, and just saying, okay, if I want to be a basketball player, then should I train to be on the high school team or should I train to be on an NBA team? And it's changing your mindset. Like you're just saying, like if you're going to be a successful actor, don't just think about the next play or the next musical, or think about the end game.
Yeah, and I see that happening in music for example, my teacher when I was in undergrad, the very first, sit down you have is, well, what do you want to do? You can do all sorts of things.
Yep.
Do you just want to sing a little better for grandma's birthday? Great, we can help you with that.
Right.
Do you want to sing, at the largest opera houses in the world? Okay, then that's a different
whole nother
set.
level.
But they're all valid. We don't need to just say, well, it's all about the Broadway career. And if you don't do that, then, what did you do it for?
Right.
But you can still have an appreciation for it. And I think that works really well in the music industry because you have to have a certain level of skill. Now, you could be discovered. It could be American Idol. I'd love to hear the story of bands growing up, in the 80s, and that these bands actually had some really amazing people in them that were musicians. Yes, there's a lot of those that were phony posers and they got in and they sold a lot of records and enjoyed that crazy LA life, I'm sure.
Yes.
But there were also some of those that were really disciplined, that they actually went to music school and then they turned around and they were, a super rock star. Yeah. But they had the foundation for it. And they're also teachers and all of that stuff. And I think you're saying it is that there's the pursuit of that discipline is half the game.
Yeah,
I
agree.
That is so enjoyable.
Right.
Just to become, great at something and feel accomplished yourself, even if you don't want to do anything else. If all you want to do is take the lessons to sing, better in choir, great. And you feel good about yourself. Those are all positives.
And no one can take that discipline away. That's the thing. Once you said it earlier, once you've applied that discipline to a craft, you apply it to anything else that you pursue because that's what you know to do.
Right.
And that is the key. To me, that's why it's like hire actors, hire performers. They will do anything you put in front of them because that's what they know to do. That's their job, is to do that. It is extraordinary how the arts can be so perceived, as a luxury, but also can be perceived as the people who are in them as flighty, not, their heads in the clouds. There's those misconceptions, and you really get to know performers. Performers are some of the hardest working people out there. They really are. And they're able to think on the fly. They're able to work on the fly. They're able to do things in a really incredible way. So you are affecting that every time you have another cast through the door. It's just that constant sense of pouring into these performers. It's their opportunity that you get to do over and over and over again, which I think is extraordinary.
Well, I think in the opera world, and so often opera singers are defined as being distant and divas and ego and all this stuff. It's interesting if you boil it down to the reason that people are saying those sort of things, you come to understand that it's not really this ego-driven thing. So as a singer, if you're out and you're traveling, to, I don't know, Michigan in February, you might have to be a little protective of your instrument, which might mean you're not going to go out and talk to everybody. You might not shake their hands. When you walk into the room, you want it to be a certain temperature, right? You can't have any green M&Ms in there. Right? There are certain things, but it's about preservation of your business because you've created this little business, and the only way to keep it alive is to make sure that you're looking out for the best interests. And so opera singers are oftentimes, they come in and they're very dramatic and but part of it is they have to protect themselves.
They do.
And yes, they're going to have a scarf on, and they're always going to be having something in their mouth or drinking water. But the world looks at that as, those people are nuts. What are they doing? Well, they have to do that to maintain their instrument.
It's no joke.
Sports are the same. I mean, you see athletes as they warm up for things, they get they have a routine, right? I can't go do this game unless I follow my routine. Right. Otherwise, I'm going to hurt myself.
Exactly.
Right? I have to eat a certain way and hydrate and all that stuff.
Exactly. What, in your opinion, in your experience, how do you define success, and how has that evolved over time?
I think back to the earlier rambling that I was saying is being around, being consistent. That there's a whole series of variables that obviously contribute to that. Being around, making it to the next year. To me, that is really that's what the success is. It's hard sometimes to get everybody to align with that, to recognize what the end goal is. Yeah. Sometimes we can get confused. It's the idea that everybody's in the same boat rowing in the same direction.
Right.
And you have to. Sometimes there are people with other aspirations or other motivations that can sometimes disrupt that path. And so I think it's really important to make sure that we're all looking at the same thing, which is, again, if it's the way Kyle wants it, to the show to be a certain way, well, that's because that's what the company wants, because the company wants to be here next year. So we have to make smart choices all along.
Absolutely.
It's not just because, well, Kyle feels that he wants to have it a certain way because of some personal thing.
Right.
There's a reason behind it. You don't always get a chance to explain that to
That's
everybody.
true.
That, well, here, let's sit down and let me explain to you the importance
Before we start
of this
the show
decision.
tonight, we're
You
going
pull
to
out a
bring
pipe.
Kyle.
Yeah, you're like,
I'm going to tell you all why we do this.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably my role, is that I try to look at those things. I try to be the hyper patron to look at what is on the other side of the curtain, how we're delivering our product, how well is received. Obviously, for everything from walking in the lobby, food and beverage, to the show,
bathrooms.
is that there's a reason behind it.
Bathrooms.
Yeah. So congratulations.
Yeah.
It's all about.
Thank you.
This is now it's ending. It's all ending
gonna
up in the
end.
toilet. That's all I gotta say. Right.
Do you feel along this journey, were there any pitfalls or even mistakes that stand out in your mind as pivotal in how you redirected to take things to the next level?
I think there were plenty of mistakes, but I think that comes, that's how you build your
life.
experience.
Yeah, sure.
Not allowing any of those to sort of crumble us and what we're doing, but hopefully we can apply that to making better choices, down the road. Some of it has to do with programming.
Sure.
Of course, we got to make sure we have the right shows at the right time. Sometimes it's, the people you have in the show.
Yeah.
You know what? I probably shouldn't have had that person because that might have created some environment that wasn't as conducive. Or we should probably had a designer who spent a little more time on this element because it was a little more complicated. The challenge is that you don't get a chance to correct it in real time very easily. You can't do a lot of course corrections on opening a theater show because then it only runs for 6 weeks, and you can't retool it very quickly.
Yeah.
But you can apply it hopefully to the next round of shows. One example, so we recently, last year, we purchased an LED wall, which is totally awesome. For all the listeners out there, if you haven't seen it,
Please come and see our
come
LED
see it.
wall.
We don't use it in all of our shows, but when we do, it's pretty cool.
So awesome.
Our first show we did with it was Wizard of Oz, and we were just figuring it all out.
Yeah.
Now we've tuned it in such a way that it can be just an absolutely amazing element to the design process. But with that, it's added another designer to the team.
Sure.
Right? Normally you have your scenic costumes, props, so now you have another designer on that team, and again, making sure you're all rowing in the same direction.
Right.
And sometimes we miss it because it can be overly complicated. It can distract. Look, we're in live theater, and once you do live theater and then you have a TV screen on behind you, it's really not the same suspension of disbelief in the same way. There's a level of reality that comes with a TV when you watch TVs and movies that is absolute real up close camera in your face, to theater, which is sometimes, approximation of things and props and scenic, because it's not wholly, real all the time. And so we have that sort of balance that we get to play with in certain shows, and we're learning from that.
Yeah.
And so, we've made some mistakes, fundamental mistakes. I don't think there's anything critical to the business design. I think the business design still makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
In fact, you see a lot of organizations, a lot of theater companies, just straight theater companies that are really leaning into their audience engagement and experience efforts. That is the food and beverage.
Exactly.
Come early, have a drink at the bar, and create a social experience, which is a little bit more old school theater when people would gather up and they'd spend the whole day and they'd bring a picnic basket and throw crap on stage.
I was just going to say, here come the tomatoes.
And so I think we've always had that construct about making sure that we have, the whole experience for people. And so I think like I was saying, other companies are sort of leaning into that concept. So I think it works. For us, it was a little challenge because honestly, the perception of dinner theater is not always well received by the greater community. There have been some bad dinner theater experiments over the years, at a time when sometimes quality wasn't always where it needed to be. Nowadays, there's a different focus on it. There's some great theaters out there, dinner theaters out there that do really, really great stuff, cutting edge stuff, and are leaning into the idea that the show has to stand on its own.
Yes.
It can't just be, some mom and pop kind of thing that isn't going to be of that higher quality. So it's kind of nice to see that the concept is still true, and hopefully, it stays around for a while.
Yeah, 20 years in, I think you're on the right path.
You're on the right path. And with that, I'm sitting here listening to you and your story, and I'm excited about the takeaways that I think our listeners are going to take from this. And I've been inspired. So, here I go on the image you've put in my head of basically a takeaway that I think you could tell the listeners of what you need to kind of succeed if you have an idea and you don't know where to go with it, but it's your destiny. So now I'm thinking of The Wizard of Oz because I'm thinking of a theater, and you need to have courage. You need to have a brain, and you need to have heart. And then you just have to follow the yellow brick road. And that is not a straight path.
Nothing
and you
about
have
that
to, circle yourself around with people who can get you there and may not know the path either, but they believe in you. And you're going to get them to there. And, that's kind of this true story of what your path has been, is the courage you had at 29 years old to sit in the middle of a desert and decide, I'm going to build a theater today, and then just the motivation and inspiration you've had to give to all the actors that you've brought into your family. It's inspiring. So thank you.
You're welcome.
It really is. It really is. I really hope that, especially those who are listening that have kids that are interested in theater or have talked about the arts in some way and it means something to them, it's sometimes can be a challenge for parents to plug their kids into the right place. And I hope that this is just that testament to the importance of the arts, what they mean, and how it does start young.
Yes.
And how they are so integral into however that path leads, that having that ability, that access to be able to pursue them is a really integral part of an amazing journey.
Yeah. So tell our listeners, where can they learn more?
Where can they learn more? At a library, online.
I'm into
always keep learning.
Theater,
always
theater.
Read, Google everything.
Yeah, sorry, that was a very open-ended question. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Where can they learn more about you and your theater?
So our theater, Arizona Broadway Theater, you can go to the website azbroadway.org, and all of our programming is there. Main stage concerts, kids programming. We do some other special events. We've got fundraisers. We've got concert series. It's very busy at the theater, and that's kind of a desire of mine, is that we don't want it to ever be quiet.
Right.
Something exciting about having all the energy in the room. So we're very busy all the time. But yeah, you can certainly check it out, Arizona Broadway Theater.
Wonderful.
Love it. Thank you for being here with us today.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. It's
My
a
pleasure.
pleasure.
Okay, I love it. I love it.
Thanks for joining us. If you loved this episode and know of someone who would find value in it, please spread the word and share it with a friend. We are passionate about redefining success, and it would mean the world if you could help us get our mission out to as many people as possible. Please take a minute to write a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. You can also hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Connect with us on Instagram at Success Resequencing Project or via our website at www.successresequencing.com. We'd love to hear your story.